the nature of the pipeline to create data today is very different from 12 months ago. It is indeed the quality of data that makes all the difference in the models. You look at, you look at Llama 3, it seems to be quite good. I mean, the Llama 3 8B, if you've seen, is actually doing quite well. How people experience GenAI, it's not a chat interface. Core mission of Sarvam is, how do I get 800 million Indians? To the conclusion is, either I can sit on the side and give gyan to everybody, or I can jump in.
Hello everyone, and welcome again to Theory of Next. This is a series where we explore the spaces of tomorrow and also discover opportunities for founders to build in. And now in the second part, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Vivek Raghavan, the co-founder of Sarvam AI, possibly one of the very rare startups, AI startups in India that is doing foundational technology work in AI. It is a pleasure to have you, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and great to see all of you. And by the way, the commute was extremely long.
Yeah. 15 seconds.
To tell the truth, I had been spending 15 years in this, what we call as digital public infrastructure. And I think I pretty much thought that the rest of my life, whatever I do, open source, sarkari work, and things like that. And that's really that's where I thought things. But then, everybody knows what happened in December 22, right? I mean, ChatGPT happened. And I think that actually, and to tell the truth, even though we were working on things peripherally kind of related to this, we were not, we didn't see it coming, right? To tell the truth, we didn't see it coming. But when it happened, I think it led to, at least, in my mind, and I think in many other people's mind, that, hey, this, whatever you say, seems to be a fundamentally deflationary technology. And what does that mean? It makes things that were absolutely not possible before possible today. And I think that's really the thing that came. And, can you think of a future where, every child has the access to a good education? Or can you think of a future where everybody has access to a doctor? Now, there are obviously many other things that GenAI can do, but the fact is that these kinds of things, there was actually zero possibility of such a thing happening. And for the first time, you say, hey, maybe this is possible. Maybe this is something that could happen, right? And so therefore, that was certainly one kind of aha moment which was there. But then you said, okay, what do you do about it, right? So, given that where I was from, I said, okay, makes sense. Let's go to kind of philanthropic funding. Let's go to government. Let's tell them, hey, these are all the things that this is really important. And the other part about this technology was, and it hasn't, and I think this technology being so powerful, I think also has a geopolitical kind of implication to it, right? So I said, let's say, hey, we need to. So I went to talk to everybody, and and I think that two things that I realized that, right, we need to move fast, and you need to have significant funding to actually move the needle here, right? And so therefore, and what came to the conclusion is, either I can sit on the side and give gyan to everybody, or I can jump in, right? That's really the thought. And so we said, okay.
You didn't want to be an investor?
I was going to say the same thing. Let's leave the gyan part.
So and I think so we said, okay, you want to jump in, you want to be part of this and actually look at, but it's a continuation. I think, and one of the things that, I think that I've been involved with this whole DPI stuff for a decade and a half. And I think, when you look at UPI for the first time, you see something is easier in India than the rest of the world. But the point is that all? Is that good enough? Just one thing is easier, is that good enough? And really that, why can't everything be easy, right? That's the question that we saw. And we said, okay, maybe the right way is to look at to start something and look at the market and see that this is and the fundamental goal of while building foundational models is part of Sarvam's story. The core mission of Sarvam is, how do I get 800 million Indians, everybody who has a smartphone and data of some kind, to actually use GenAI to make their lives better? And that's the intent of what we want to do. Yeah. So, I mean, and it was an unusual pitch to give to a VC, but I think that it resonated, and I think we had a good team. But I think that the question is also, it's a responsibility, right? Can something like this truly happen out of India? And that's where, even with my investors sitting next to me, I say that we have to prove that, right?
Do you want to say something about how you talked about the voice to voice as a thesis, but would love to get the personal story around how this happened.
We got pitched 1.4 billion Indians, and now I see the tag. He's my arm. So I gotta update my memo.
Maybe she gets it.
I'm just kidding. We've been seeing investment stability in the US, then Mistral in Europe, and we're kind of fairly close to Anthropic and so on. So what we saw globally is that the supply chain for AI is getting fragmented and getting sovereignized. Starting from silicon, which obviously is becoming a lot more of a sovereign nation asset, to stuff that sits on silicon, which is the foundation models and the data that goes into the foundation models, and then above that, maybe the infrastructure layers and then application layers. There will be a world where a large part of the supply chain will get country specific, starting with the top 5 or top 10 countries, but over time perhaps even more so. And then what do you need to then go ring fence this opportunity for each individual sovereign nation? It certainly is not just technical of a problem. It requires somebody who is sophisticated enough to really approach it from the policy angle, protecting your local turf angle, pushing maybe local players out angle, as well as building the world's best-in-class technology, because developers don't care if you know Modi or whatever. They just care that does it solve my problem or not. So we have to really solve the technical problem also.
Yeah.
And that combination of the policy understanding and influence to almost go to the degree that we will design or help design India's AI policy in the next 40, 50 years. We'll be in the room and that decision is being made. Plus, we're going to build one of the world's most advanced team in AI from India, for India. That combination is very hard and very rare to find in any market. And when Vivek and Pratyush came together, we felt like there is no better team to then go commit their lives to do it. Which is why I sort of, in the previous session, I was saying, commitment, clarity, and.
Do you, Dr. Vivek, many people would describe you as Indic LLM. It's an Indic LLM company. I'm sure you don't like that as a description, right? How would you define sort of the broader vision?
No, so see, I think that what we want is to build systems, not just models, but systems that actually enable Indians to kind of experience GenAI. So clearly, for example, something like language is an important part of it. We are not saying that because we see language as a means of access, right? So therefore, and I think that is that's really the case, that if I can increase access for people, language is the core. It's not, I mean, and that's from that perspective we see that building, that is, whether it's access to information or access to getting stuff done, right? Which is mentioning the plane ticket example that Hemant was talking about. But in the end, we see that so first thing, we think it is Indian languages. Second thing, I think most people would agree that Indians like to speak. We like to speak. So therefore, I think that we think that. And I think that that's again something that should be proven out. But I think that voice will play a very, very core piece of what we want to do. And then the third thing is that we need the systems to be it needs to be an agentic system. You need to actually figure out ways to get things done simply for people. So I think we see all these three things as core to what we are doing. And of course, on top of that, which you can say almost as a separate thing, is that this is a technology that is important enough that we need to understand it from the base all the way to the top. And that's where we are saying that foundational models are also important. I mean, and because we need to be able to understand the entire stack. And at the top layer, how do people experience these things will be very different, I think, in India than and already we are seeing, right, with all these agentic systems coming out, how people experience Gen AI. It's not a chat interface, right? That's really not where I think the value of this is going to be in the long space.
And these differences are sort of interesting, right? Because, and you've spoken about this before, India is a very unique unique country with unique use cases. For example, obviously the diverse languages. It is more cost conscious. It is voice first, like we just discussed. It requires some sort of agentic framework to get things done very, very simply, like you put. With all this, what do you think are the emerging use cases that you are seeing? And this question is also for you, Hemant. Emerging very specific Bharat use cases that you are seeing in the market, or perhaps some, let's say, custom models you are developing to address these. Can you give us some color on that?
You don't want me to start? Yeah. So see, I think that there are a number of use cases. I mean, in the end, right, when you want to look at this, you want to use these models to get stuff done. And I think that and what are the things that people want to get done, right? So therefore, there may be simple things like getting certain services, or getting legal advice, or it could be something like that, or it could be something like, hey, how do I understand? Let's say I have I'm an enterprise in India, and I'm looking at, I have, salespeople all over the place. I have a complex set of salespeople and distributors and maybe end users of my product. And I really want to understand what people really want by this system. And if you think that if you want to understand how you can get those insights at scale, right? I mean, and in the sense that what people truly want, right? And of course, in general, when you have a way by which you can have a natural conversation with a person, then of course it gets to everything that a human can do, starting from something like customer support to moving to actually upselling, right? I mean, and there is, I think all of these capabilities are some things that are truly possible through agentic systems, right? When you're actually talking to someone, understanding their intent, having some things at the back end that can actually make things happen. Those are the kinds of systems that we want to believe, and which should go all the way to the to the farthest reaches of the country, and at the same time, from an analytics perspective, and from you instantly have this understanding of what is happening, the pulse of what's happening in your organization, in the country, or at every scale that you can think about. So the ability to actually be able to interact naturally at voice at massive scale. I mean, if this is something you're doing at a small scale, then the returns are limited. But the intent is, if you can actually do that at massive scale and make it happen, right, at a price point that makes sense for India, I think that people will be able to use this in ways that we still can't imagine. Right?
Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this goes back to the investment thesis for us, right? Because there's a big debate happening globally about this large God models versus small micro models. I do think that the world is going to converge to a very few set of very large God-like models, which will generate answers for the broad questions that the world is facing. Perhaps things like, summarize me the best 5 news reports about so and so today, or I don't know, like, what is the answer to question X or Y. But these models, I mean, they don't know anything about me. They don't know when to go tell me, hey, you should buy, your mom's birthday is coming up and you should buy, and here's click a button and I'll buy her flowers or whatever, right? It does not know anything about me. It will never know anything about me. So it is not solving my problem, it is solving a part of my problem. So when we actually, the Sarvam investment happened because 3 or 6 months before the investment came to us, I was reading this paper by this gentleman in the Scandinavian nation. His name is Van de Harm. It's now being called Harm's Law. But if you were to just imagine a y and an x axis, and think of this, like curved L that goes like that. On the y-axis, it's the further up you go, the higher the cost of training a model is. And it's actually the area under the graph. It's not the dot, it's the area under the graph. And then you cut the graph like, at a 45-degree angle, and what happens at the bottom is, on the x-axis is the inference on that model. So let's say you go to the top of the model here and you're training a big God model for $100 million. And then to make money from that model, you got to inference on that model on the x-axis, right? The area under the x-axis, the L part of the lower part of the L, curved L. You need to have 100 million inferences at $1 each to then recoup the cost of training the model, okay? Because the model took $100 million to train. Now, obviously, the cost of the price of inference is 1,000 of that, maybe 10,000 of that. It's not $1 per inference. It's 1/100th of a cent, maybe 1,000th of a cent, even going further down. So in that world, it'll take you billions, if not tens of billions of inferences on that model to just recoup the cost of the model in a market like the US. And that might take several years, maybe even several quarters, if not years. But in that 2 or 3 quarters to 2 or 3 years, the world has changed. So a God model will then not be able to answer questions like what is happening in Israel yesterday. And what do you need to go do? You got to go retrain the model every day, every morning about what has changed in the world of information globally. And that is very expensive because you have 100 billion parameters, right? Because you took that much time to build the God model. So what I think needs to happen is the dot that is at the top of the left side needs to come to the bottom and maybe train a model for $1 million and keep retraining it for $100 a day or $1,000 a month. And then that'll solve a customer success problem for me, because that data set does not change every day. Customers still have the same problems. Same thing for my taxes. I do taxes twice a year. Already I hate the number. It should be so anyway, you get my point, right? So you have many more models trained for $1,000, $100,000 max, retrained for almost free, and then let them run amok. That's the Sarvam's thesis, right? You bring that cost down, so you inference a lot longer because the longevity of the model is many, many years, perhaps infinite. A customer success model can survive for many years.
Fundamentally, this point that Hemant mentioned around the cost of training, and how is it fundamentally different for Indian languages and token density, etc. What's the best way for someone to sort of understand it? Is there some benchmarks you use, and how are you lowering the cost of that data collection and training?
Okay, this is involving quite a few different things. So
tell us about your entire business.
No. So I think so first thing, I think I'll leave this as a segue to certain things. So one of the things that if you understand that most of the models that are these global models, they are trained, of course, with almost no indic data, right? Somebody had said something like Common Crawl has like 0.1% of Hindi, and that is by far and away the most common data. That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is that most of so almost all large language models have what is known as a tokenizer, right? And this tokenizer has a certain size. And these tokens are related to kind of give the most efficient representation of the text that comes in, right? And so if you have actually text that is in, for example, English, you have approximately, for each word, maybe it takes you 1 to 1.5 tokens is probably the cost. So if I had a 10-word sentences, maybe it's 12, 13 tokens is what really the cost is. But then if you look at the representation in, whether it is GPT-4 or whether it is, Gemini or whether it is Llama, the number of the space for Indic language tokens, okay, is actually severely constrained, and that is because they are training on primarily data that is English focused. So therefore, the token space for Indian words, Indic words, is actually much smaller. So therefore, what ends up happening is that it is much more complex. Let's say if I have a 5-word Hindi sentence, that is probably closer to, in all of these tools, that is probably closer to 20 tokens. And if I look at something like, say, Odia, it may be 40 tokens. So what is actually saying that actually the same question, when asked, say, in English, costs 1/5 of what it costs to ask that same question. I mean, notwithstanding the quality of the answer may not be as good. But I think that's the other thing. But the fundamental thing is that when there is less space for tokens of a particular language, the cost of any query in that language. Now, this is obviously going in completely the opposite direction to what in India, we need things to be cheaper, right? As opposed to being more expensive. But here, every call to an LLM today is actually significantly more expensive. If that and of course the answer may also be junk, but significantly more expensive in India. So that's one of the things that we said, that we will train models where actually the tokenizer space for Indian languages is significantly higher, so that it becomes much less expensive to actually do both, to train with Indian language data as well as to infer with Indian language data. Now that's at least one of the things that we looked at. But I think in the end, and I think it is being proven almost every day, that it is indeed the quality of data that makes all the difference in the models. You look at Llama 3, it seems to be quite good. I mean, the Llama 3 8B, if you've seen, is actually doing quite well. And I think the question, if you go and read into the reports, the most important thing is the focus on the quality of the data that was used to train, and also the size. I mean, I think they're talking about, 15 trillion tokens is what they trained they trained Llama 3 with. So it is clearly, but I think it is the quality of the data that is making the difference. And even in the larger models, even in the basically smaller models are getting better and better as you. So therefore, I think the other part about Indian language data was there was very little data of good quality. I mean, that is the truth. And even since we've started, we have realized that the amount of data that's available of high quality in Indian languages is quite sparse. And I think that's something that we are figuring out, ways by which you can actually create a significant amount of this kind of data and actually make sure that you actually create something that is of great value.
Just curious, how are you going about creating these high quality data sets? How are you?
I think one of the things that is interesting, and I leave it at a high level, that since we have got LLMs, we actually use LLMs as tools to do some of these things, and I think that has helped all of the models, not just our models. And I won't go into how you guys can think about how you could use the nature of the pipeline to create data today is very different from 12 months ago.
So curious to know some examples of things that you're seeing developers or other people in the ecosystem build on top of Sarvam. Right? What are the interesting, use cases that you have seen that people are building, or what do you hope sort of like gets built?
So I think, I think that as far as Sarvam is concerned, there is only one thing that we have. One important thing that we open sourced, which was that Open Hathi model, which some of you may be aware of. But I think that we are going to be putting out endpoints that people can actually use and build things from. And also, we are also going to be having some of these kind of low code kind of experiences that people can actually use to solve specific problems, and stay tuned for some of those things. But I think that if you are a developer in GenAI, I mean, I want to say as a generic thing, not necessarily related to Sarvam, this is really the golden age, right? Every day something interesting is happening, right? And I think that you should. I mean, and I think that there are so many things that you can do with what is out there and what is out there in open source, and I think that it is quite exciting. And I don't know how much people are experimenting with it, but I think there's lots of very interesting experiments you can do that are not that expensive to do also.
So I think, and I know a lot of people in the audience will probably be users of Sarvam now. So, and I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to this. I probably should, but what is the status right now? I think to Isha's question, is it already accessible by startups? Do you have larger corporations that are tapping into it right now?
So right now we are working more on POCs and stuff like that. So other than things that we have open source, there's not something that people can use as of now. But hopefully it should.
Any
Yeah, tentatively you could share? I would say in the next couple of months people will see experiences that using Sarvam that people can actually build on.
Fantastic.
Awesome. I think there's one question I especially wanted to ask you, Dr. Vivek, and given your background in DPI, you have also earlier spoken about this very combinatorial, very dramatic effect that the intersection of digital public infrastructure and AI built on top of that can have. And can unlock for the India use cases, right? Can you sort of help all of us in this room sort of imagine what this could look like? What does the intersection of DPI and AI actually means?
See, I think one of the interesting things that India has done over the past decade, and I've had the opportunity to be associated in a small way, is that I think we built a number of these pieces, these digital public infrastructure, which I think has in many ways, made, India where people are actually transacting digitally in many different ways than was happening before that, right? And I think that, but still, right? You are, I think, as you know, right? I mean, I think I think I want to come back to the original things, right? How do you make things that people would do, right? I mean, we need to do whatever, right? It needs to happen much more simply, right? And I think that concept that if any service, right? And I think that whether it is a service that we get starting from the government or a service that you get not necessarily from the government. I mean, if things become simpler to do, right? And I think that's the promise that GenAI actually has for these kinds of for people. And then that combination, right, with the fact that we already have some of these large digital public infrastructure. When you say, if I say AI is basically unlocking a new interface that improves access and makes things easier, then if people's lives can become simpler because of that, that is really the promise of the combinatorial effect of DPI and AI.
So I think I'm going to pull Hemant into this as well. I mean, are there like one or two examples that either of you sort of have in mind for what you would love to see or what is possible imminently? I'll give you something that we've done a lot of evangelism and investments as well around ONDC, right? Yes. And one of the things we've talked about is what happens when sort of GenAI meets the seller ecosystem, the mass Bharat seller ecosystem, right? So in a very elementary way, one can see that a lot of things that keep small sellers from going online, creating a catalog, being able to update it, managing multiple channels, etc. Technically, and I hope with Sarvam soon, for anybody who's not even an English speaker, could potentially be sort of done very quickly and efficiently, bringing millions of new sellers online. I mean, this is just like an idea. So if you find something like Hemant, like this, we have to do it together, okay? You have to share. Just kidding. But is there like, are there one or two sort of reference projects, POCs, or applications like these that you think could really break open the market in India, Bharat, very imminently in the next 1 or 2 years? Do you have any things that you've discussed internally as dream projects?
I mean, having DPI plus AI anagrams to paid, which is what we really like. So I do think there is value in making AI accessible to everybody. And I think the reason we invested in Sarvam is because we're not looking to solve rich people problem in a rich country. We're solving everybody's problem, and that problem will take different shapes. For maybe you should talk about some of the use cases we have tried with Tuition Anna and a few other things, where I think it's a pretty. And I was pretty surprised at how the form factor to get into the world of LLM is different for India, for example, versus what it would look like in the US. So I think there is if we get to that scale and the cost problem, if we get ahead of that, then you could experiment and find some very interesting ways to then make that technology available in different ways to everybody in India, which I think is where the big money is for an investor like us, but also it solves much bigger problems than solving less an enterprise customer success kind of a use case. Which is what we see a lot of. But maybe some of the examples will be helpful.
So I mean, I think so. It's interesting, right? I mean, for example, I think I want to give this as an example of how we should think about Gen AI somewhat different in India, right? Is that, let's say that you had, I could basically, build a bot, and I can say I can take GPT-4 and I can do RAG, and I can say, okay, fine, here you can ask a question from a textbook, right? But now that's something that doesn't make sense in India, right? I mean, the cost of doing that, if I have millions, hundreds of millions of kids accessing that piece of information, that doesn't sound like the right answer to actually allow that at a scale. But on the other hand, if I said maybe that given, say, a certain amount of content, let's say I have a chapter of a textbook, right? If I have a chapter of a textbook and I said, okay, let's think about all the kinds of questions that somebody could ever, have about this particular piece of content. Maybe, okay, let's say maybe there's 10,000 questions that are possible. Now, if I actually could compile those 10,000 questions and actually have a much simpler model serve that for what somebody wanted to do, that actually makes a lot of sense. But of course, it still needs to feel like natural language. It has to feel like it is, it's able to understand, and it needs to understand when I can't ask the question, when I can't answer the question myself, and maybe you need to fall back to something else. So you have to think about what are clever ways of using these kinds of technologies to actually solve problems in a resource constrained environment.
I mean, the aha moment for me when I saw the demo was like, with Sarvam, given the technology and the policy angle that the company brings to bear, you could then technically at some point in the future suck in all of the NCRT books into our engine, right? Working with the government, and then and it actually is the demo that you guys showed us. You could have a QR code, which is a behavior that Indians understand really well, from kids to adults, slapped on every single chapter. And the way a kid enters the world of that chapter is by scanning the QR code and asking a tuition Anna some questions. What is happening in this chapter? I have a quiz tomorrow, 5 top questions. And then the LLM will come back with an answer. These are the 5 top questions and here are the answers. Or you can ask, well, okay, this chapter talks about Battle of Patna or Plassey. What led to that? That is not in the chapter. It is somewhere outside of the chapter. It may even be the outside of the book, because there's a God LLM sitting above all that on the server side. It says, how does this war lead to the World War II or the Battle of Independence in India? And you can actually even zoom out and say, well, here's the story around that. This led to that led to this. In next year school term, you will learn about that, and then eventually, this is how it went to the First World War or that sort of stuff is not possible today. So taking a student along that journey and then narrating a story around that chapter will make them a lot more engaged, but also give them fundamentally different knowledge about what they are really learning. And that can only happen with an LLM. That could not be possible in the absence of the LLM, which is why some of this stuff is so powerful for us.
So I think what we should do is we cut short audience questions, so we should probably go to that. But before that, I will just do a rapid fire and predictions first of all. Um, Things that will change that no one is paying attention to. This is for you, Dr. Vivek.
No, I think every business and every business process will change. And people won't pay attention. Many people won't pay attention till it's too late.
Okay, we're going to ask you some more. We asked Hemant earlier. What is the most controversial view on AI that you have today?
I think in a year, people will prefer to speak to a bot, even though they know it's a bot.
In a year, people will prefer to speak to her.
Because they'll answer their question better.
I think we kind of alluded to this, but I'll ask it. What is an AI for Bharat startup that you wish someone built in India?
No, it's just, I think that as I said, I think, let's say that, we talked about, let's say there was something which could actually help with the health of every person, right? I mean, if healthcare became truly universally accessible and actually it could be something that both accessible and cost effective for people, that would be something that's amazing.
What's an example of the coolest product / most interesting glimpse into the future? Things that have felt magical to you. Could be a global product.
I mean, the past 14 months have been magical. I think things keep happening and you feel like a kid in a candy store.
Fair. One piece of advice for Indian founders building AI for Bharat, folks like developers in this audience or startups which will build on top of Sarvam.
See, I think building for India is not easy. I think it's not the easiest thing to do, but we have to do it. So therefore, more power to you.
What are the benefits of training the LLM in local language as opposed to leveraging the translation capabilities that already exist? Why do we need LLM for local language?
So I think there are two kinds of things that are there. Of course, I think translation itself is a problem which is not a well solved problem. Okay, if you know anything about translation, and I've worked in translation for for a few years, I think the key though is that the pipelines themselves become much simpler when you actually are able to both get your question and your answer in those languages. But certainly, it's also a possible way that if you actually have clever translations and clever understanding of intent, you could use an LLM which was trained in English. It's not. There are certainly kinds of applications in certain situations where that's not a bad answer.
Yeah, Hemant, my question regarding you talked about the agent automation and not installing apps and GUI is no more required, right? So regarding that, this kind of conversation happens always, right? When the 10 years before they told the emails are no more, then they told voice calls are no more. Now you are saying apps are gone. There is no more GUI. So see, this is
The man has a point.
no, this is out of excitement, right? We have to see what is the standardized way, what is the proven way, which will stay back. It is not like radically thinking something will replace everything, right? So we should think in that angle also, right? The GUI will stay, like email, chat, and voice call, phone call. It may stay back and continue going on, right? Along with the automation and the agents, right? So I want to know about your opinion.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, the world does not change overnight. Behaviors don't change overnight. I guess my point about, anyway, I'm not in the business of predicting where the future is. That's the job of the founder, to imagine a future and then with sheer power of their will, pull that future into the present. I just like to find those people and invest behind them. Now, it's their job to imagine what the world of future should look like and could look like. It's not my job. I do think I do think there is value in thinking and dreaming about what a potentially attractive future could look like. And that is where some of my thinking is coming from, right? Whether it'll happen or not, I mean, the founder has to go get inspired by what he or she is thinking and then build it. I think if you build it the way I'm imagining it, it could be a pretty interesting paradigm shift. But again, it's not my job to then imagine it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and one more question to Dr. Vivek. So, you talked about voice as an interface for is more valuable in India, right? Just understanding background where it comes from, like why you think like voice interface is valuable. Like I'm not able to follow up on that.
No, I think if you look at, I mean, here I can say just from, even you look at Google searches, voice searches are most common in India. For example, in WhatsApp, voice notes are extremely common. It's a very common way that I think in India people like to use voice as their interface, and I think that it is also. And I think it depends on the situation. In many times and under many conditions, it's also the most efficient way of expressing your intent. So yeah, but I think that in the overall the interface I think will be reimagined, but nothing will go away. It will actually be rethought as to how you access things when you are looking at a combination of voice and UX and UI and other things. And I think that how people will kind of interact with them may actually change, right? One of the things that voice is very good is, I think it's very good at cutting through hierarchy and cutting through when there's a very, if you want to go to a very specific pace in a complex flow, voice is actually very good at getting started. After that, maybe clicking a button may be the best, most efficient way to go to the next step. So, and I think that fluidity between the various modalities is, I think, where we're going to go.
So, thank you so much for the talk, by the way. It was a lovely talk. My question is around lowering the cost of inferencing. Recently, Apple acquired an in-device inferencing company, I believe. So, would love to know your opinion on you using the consumer devices for inferencing. Will that lower down the cost, and is that a focus for you guys?
No, I think it is something that it is a trend that we are definitely following, and is certainly interesting. And I think that there are only 2 or 3 ways of reducing the costs of inferencing. Well, I mean, first in the beginning, I talked a little about tokens, but I think then the thing is using smaller models is the key. And then the third way is really there are 2 different things. Actually, it's interesting that if you actually inference on the edge, it is at some level it is cheaper, but actually, inferencing in the data center per watt is actually cheaper over there. But who pays for it is different, right? When someone's on your device, somebody else pays for it, and when it's in the data center, a different person pays for it. So therefore, I think that is the economics of that works. But we certainly do believe that many of these things will move to the edge. There will be parts of, and I think it's a trend to look at.
Cheaper tokens and things like that. But looking at the last 30 years of the internet, like since it's happened, Google of the US is still India. Facebook is still Facebook of India. Why does Sarvam have to be open for Google?
No, it doesn't, unless we actually provide value. It will not be different. I think that, but I think the fact is that I think this is important enough that we should aim to do this, right? I mean, and I think that's the key. That and I think that it is a fundamental technology, and we think we can actually play a very significant role in this market. But whether we are successful or not, the market will decide.
Hemant, you said that access to data is easy as nobody cares about privacy in India. When we are talking about creating high quality data sets, you said you would like to see help becoming totally accessible. My question is, how does Sarvam think about data privacy? Data privacy is...
No, it is. I mean, it is. Firstly, I mean, I think that we think this is very serious. I don't think that this is something that we take privacy, especially in something like health, needs to be taken extremely seriously, right? I think that there is no question about that. I think that I don't know if you've seen some of the documents that we are talking about in the health stack, and nothing to do with what Sarvam is doing, but I think it's I think at least some of the thinking process in creating these personal health records and the thought about privacy, I think is the thinking is actually quite sophisticated, and I think is something that can lead to an ecosystem in this kind of area. But there is no question that data, especially health data, is extremely private, and we need to treat it with that appropriate level, with both the we need to treat that seriously, and I think that I know historically we've had some use, but I think that as we move towards formalization of some of these things, we need to be extremely clear about what we think about privacy, especially in the age of AI.
Also, maybe just to clarify, my comment was more on data consent, not data privacy. Privacy is a different domain, and consent is different. In India, it is easier to get consent about. I mean, that's why you don't have bunch of these cookie, accept my cookie in India and the US, but you have it in Europe because consent is just easier to get here.
So I have a two question to Dr. Vivek. So first question is, how does the Sarvam see the opportunity given that Facebook is coming with the Llama 3 and they have a huge high quality data set in the Indian multilingual languages to the WhatsApp?
So, I mean, and I think the interesting thing about WhatsApp is that I mean, if you believe them, and actually I do, is they don't have access to that data, which is
Notes and all?
what?
Voice notes?
No, they don't have access to. It is end-to-end encrypted, so they don't actually have access to those voice notes. But having said that, if you're talking to a business or something like that, in some of those cases, these things are not true, and potentially it could be used by somebody. But any person-to-person message, they don't have access to a voice note. Yeah.
Second question, does solving the Indian multilingual problem is just cracking the better translation?
Translation is a complex problem. It's not just and I think that translation is one way by which you can do it. But it's interesting. I don't think that what is the meaning of translation is really that you want to understand the intent and of what somebody wants to do, rather than just translating something. And I think that at least how traditionally we have looked at translation and things like that, there could be translations which are perfectly correct but absolutely unintelligible, and there are other kinds of situations where you're not necessarily saying things correctly, but you actually end up with understanding the intent very clearly. And so therefore, in the end, when you want to actually do things, how can I actually understand what is it that I want to do, and then provide me the right answer, which is actually where GenAI is kind of very effective, that if the context is there, GenAI gives us answers that we are pleased with, right? And that's our answers that we want.
But given that
One
there is a
last
paucity of Indian multilingual data set, do you think synthetic data generation will solve that problem?
Synthetic data generation will certainly play a role in there. I think that, but on the other hand, if fundamental diversity in certain kinds of data is needed, synthetic data generation typically is not too great in generating things out of distribution. So therefore, that is something that is always a challenge, that you need to have some diversity.
Okay, I think last question. All right, go for it. I love the energy.
Yeah. I just wanted to follow up on the end-to-end encryption part.
Yes.
I mean, if data really, in my past experience, I was data engineer at Meta. I realized like it was illegal to query the DAU tables, for example. But I realized is there a mathematical equivalent of say zero knowledge proof in end-to-end encryption where you cannot read the data, store the data, but you can train models out of it, convert it into models? Is that something the research world is currently working on, or can be a big threat to a lot of things? That is one question. The second one is, how do companies like Databricks, for example, build amazing models if they are really ethical about the customer data they have in place? Or even like Meta, for example, how can they churn out amazing models if they do not really have access to data? Like, what's going on?
I don't know how to answer your question, but I see. I think I think as far as actually being able to work with data when it is in encrypted form to do various things, I think this is a field which is in its early stages. I don't think practically for large models that is something that is possible to do today. But what will happen tomorrow, I can't say. But as of now, you can do certain kinds of computation when things are in encrypted form. But I think training a model of this scale, I don't think is something that is today possible. Now, just because it is not possible today doesn't mean it may not be possible tomorrow. But as of that is the case. Whether how people are ethical or not ethical, I have no comment about that. I think we'll let that stand.
It's a very meta question.